Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, the 8th of November 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. With me in the studio, of course, is Mike Robinson. And we will be joined by live video Skype link by David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives. Well, the weather across the country, most people are saying it's grey and pretty chilly, cold. Certainly that's the case here in Plymouth. It's dull north of the border, also chilly, but things are hotting up politically, particularly in the States. And what better place to start than some comment by Russia today on the American elections? And Russia today has said it's unacceptable because Moscow is apparently slamming the US for barring Russian diplomats from observing the US election. They say the US administration's law enforcement officials stop at nothing to cut off Russian representatives from an opportunity to assess the provisions of holding the upcoming elections. That was the Deputy Foreign Minister, Sergei Ryabkov, if I pronounced that correctly. The Deputy Foreign Minister's statement comes hours after the spokesperson of the Russian Foreign Minister, Maria Zakharov, wrote on Facebook that things went as far as open intimidation of Russian diplomats. And so it goes on. Well, we say at the top, Dear Russia today, that George Soros has effectively confirmed that the US elections will be rigged. So, of course, they don't want any foreign observers there. Foreign observers during elections are only for little countries, usually the ones that the Russians, together with UK, are going to take over.
The Americans?
Yes, probably the Americans, actually. Right, slip of the tongue. Well, we better give some credit here to 21st Century Wire because I think they win the prize over, or Patrick Henningsen wins the prize over front page edition for the American elections. Trump versus Clinton 2016, Mickey Mouse versus Cruella de Vil. Well, I found it remarkable the fact that nothing, absolutely nothing about Hillary Clinton's background has been published by mainstream media in UK, BBC, utter silence on criminality, deaths in Benghazi, weapons trafficking, drugs, breaches of national security through emails. It doesn't matter what has come out of the woodwork. Nobody wants to talk about it because I think, as has been predicted, how did it work? The popular vote goes to Trump, but Hillary is apparently on to become president of the United States. And what condition will that lead the world? Well, let's have a look at the military.
Okay, well, we're going to begin with the F-35, the plane that hardly flies. But apparently Britain has been chosen as the maintenance or one of the maintenance hubs for this aircraft. So this is fantastic. The maintenance program is going to generate millions of pounds and support thousands of jobs in North Wales, apparently. So the Ministry of Defence said yesterday they were pleased to announce that the UK has been chosen by the F-35 Programme Office to be a global repair hub providing maintenance, repair, overhaul and upgrade services for the F-35 avionic and aircraft components. Well, goodness knows there's going to be a lot of that kind of activity because this thing is unreliable, it breaks down, it can't start its engines if it's got a tailwind.
Catches fire.
It can only fire its guns while it's on the ground so far.
And a little bit of structural defectiveness.
And as for the avionics, I mean, you know, they're just not fit for purpose. So there's going to be lots and lots of maintenance, which is why I guess we're going to generate millions of pounds of work for people in North Wales. So maybe that's a good thing. Michael Fallon said, this establishes Britain as a hub for all European F-35s and is hugely positive news for our high-tech and innovative defence industry. So, David, over to you for comments straight away, I think.
Well, you don't have to have a very long memory to look back into our recent history where aircraft manufacture and production and maintenance is concerned to see that this is just the biggest effrontery to our workforce that, you know, really, you know, we used to actually make aircraft in this country, and now we're getting effectively what sweepings off the floor with this arrangement and not making anything. But what it does tell us is that they're going further and further down the business is war route and the industrial blending of all of this global policy here, that this this looks like will be a hub for a global air force, or a part global air force. That's sort of what this. That's how I'm interpreting this. That we're going to have a conglomerate of European, UK, and US, more or less blending all into one thing. So that looks like where it's going with this. But to sort of couch it to the electorate up there in North Wales, aren't we doing well for you? Considering all of the people that marched in Hatfield and in the sort of heartlands of our aircraft manufacturing when they killed TSR2. And we're getting to the stage now where I think, under Major, we couldn't even legally make a Harrier jump jet, this sort of nonsense. No, I just don't see this as a viable solution for our country at all if we're going to continue to stay as a country. And that's the key thing.
David, one of the things that you said to me yesterday, which was absolutely spot on, of course, with the loss of the manufacturing goes all the ancillary skills. We were talking, I think, about British steel, but if steel's not being produced, then people who are machining steel, people who are making machine tools or whatever it is out of that steel, all of these ancillary and linked trades go. And so what you're actually doing is destroying the whole skill base within the country. As you said, we used to produce a fantastic selection of aircraft. Many of them were world beaters, but of course, we were never allowed to market them properly. And the good old BBC usually took its role in destroying the project. I mean, even if we take Concorde, for example, a joint project with the French, but let's give it credit for what it was, a fantastic aircraft. And from the outset, we had the BBC saying that if this aircraft flew, I think every church tower in Britain was going to fall down. People were going to die of the supersonic crack as it went out over Land's End. Utter nonsense. But time and time again, we've seen our manufacturing skill base decimated, the car industry, shipbuilding, aircraft industry. This is not accidental. This is planned collaboration across all three parties. And what are we seeing replacing it? Massive power of these global corporations, which are not even under the control of one company. This is one country, I beg your pardon. This is not accidental, is it? There's something much deeper and more sinister going on.
Yes, it is. It's going down the road of Britain no longer being a country. If we cannot have control over steel, and this is a fundamental thing here for our national survival, our national engineering and manufacturing. If there's no steel, and I've said this before on here on the UKC, we won't even be able to make a nut and bolt and washer, and this is the level of danger that we're in as a country. So it must clearly be that the other view then, from where this money flows are being controlled from and policy flows are being controlled from, that they clearly don't recognise countries or nations or particular peoples within that. All they see is money flows. That they don't see a country. That it's not a consideration. So they're not viewing Great Britain as Great Britain. They're just viewing us as part of a bigger global money flow program. But you're quite right that the vital thing here is, of course, is this continuing down this road where we're losing steel, losing manufacturing, losing the ability to make an aircraft or whatever, whether that be a washing machine or a telly. It's the same thing. It's in essence making stuff. That we're just going to fall foul at some stage and be part of some other big thing where our government is already, basically devoid. It's devoid of representing the people. It represents something else. It represents whatever this party is. It doesn't represent the people. So this is very, very dangerous territory because all of the other engineering in Britain, particularly what's left, hangs off this. It's one big. If you view engineering and manufacturing as an oak tree, you keep hacking away at the branches, which is what they've done over the last 40, 50 years. We've ended up with a stump. And now what they're doing is they're going to cut the stump out, which is the steel, cut the stump out. And now they're going to bring they're going to bring some kind of plant in and rip the root up. And there'll be nothing, absolutely nothing.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at what is happening with EU military integration. Ursula von der Leyen, the German defense minister, made a statement yesterday saying that Europe needs to modernise its military defence and security to match NATO. She said, we've seen an enormous modernisation drive by NATO over the past 3 years because of the Kremlin's behaviour, apparently. She said, this was correct and important, but I believe that we must invest at least the same energy into the modernisation of the European and Security Defence Union. She said, I see a big mission for the European Union, which must work for a solution together with African countries, but to do that, we must better organise and bundle the many instruments it has in the civilian and military realms, actually implement them and offer a joint European response. So they're talking about increasing European level spending on military missions, jointly developing assets such as helicopters and drones, expanding peacekeeping abroad, stronger defences against state-sponsored hackers. So we've got, of course, cybercrime being and cyber war being used as an excuse for further integration. So, David, this has got to further vindicate your position on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's the language now is of defence union, and as we've said before, they are going shopping, and they're going to direct the money flows from on high, and these will be from the prime central banking control centres that feed through from Bank of England, BIS, ECB into the EU zone. So they're hand in glove with the American with the American central banks and the Fed. So they've made it clear now they're going to go shopping, and they're going to go shopping, and at the point they go shopping, there will be military union or defence union. So this is going to happen, and everybody that's saying it isn't or how apparent it is doesn't mean that it's not going to happen or it's going to stop it. So what we're seeing here is just continuation of utter denial from our political interface and the party representatives that sit in Parliament on our behalf. So this is getting near the tipping point, but they're continually using Russia as the mitigation for this. But this Russia argument doesn't stack up. No. It just does not stack up. What we've got here, let's look at the prime things here. Under Obama and Hillary Clinton, they've interlinked their uranium key FISMAT with Russia. So that doesn't add up, does it? We've got NASA hand in glove with the Russians launching satellites and rockets at Baikonur. So that doesn't add up either. If they're so unfriendly, why are we doing that? So it's a complete nonsense. This is just mitigation. This is the lever to get the political alignment from those that are just inept to realise what's going on, to see that they can then get control of absolute policy and within the EU zone, and then just have their way, and everybody else that this is going to impact upon. Because there won't be there just won't be the level of governance to sort of have oversight or interaction with this. And this is something that I'll come back with Admiral Roger Lane-Knott was saying when he interfaced with them on an agricultural basis post coming out of the Navy, when he was representing a big group within the EU. It was an utter nightmare. It was an utter absolute nightmare, and all we got was a short end of stick. So it would just be more of the same. Yeah. So the Brexit thing just doesn't stack up. Because this is going full throttle, and we are totally intertwined militarily and industrially with the EU project. So, it's a nonsense. It's an utter nonsense.
Okay, well, let's look at Brexit, because David Davis made a statement to the House yesterday, and I thought we'd just pick a couple of bits out of it. He began by commenting on the judge's decision in the High Court, and we're not going to cover that this time. What I wanted to highlight was this statement. Our position remains that the only means of leaving is through the procedure set out in Article 50. So the government continues to absolutely limit the way that we can leave. No other discussion is possible. He went on to say that, we also have freedom. We also value the freedom of our press, apparently.
As long as it's controlled.
Yeah. He said that he was going to start by bringing forward the Great Repeal Bill. He mentioned that again. Of course, now the Great Repeal Bill we've covered quite a bit, but we should point out that, if I can find this here, the Great Repeal Bill, when Theresa May was talking about it, at the Conservative Party conference. She said that the Great Repeal Bill would have two effects. Firstly, it would remove from the statute book once and for all the European Communities Act. That's what David Davis is saying. And she also said that it would, quote, transpose the ACWIS, and that is the body of European law, into British law, which David Davis has also mentioned from time to time. Now, the ACWIS, this was the thing I wanted to point out, that Theresa May is talking about, is the European doctrine of acquis communautaire. And this means that when a power has been surrendered to a supranational body like the EU, but not necessarily limited to the EU, it can never be recovered by the member state. So basically, this is why they are intending to transpose all EU law into British law. And I just want to reiterate that once again and highlight this article that we have up on the website at the moment, International Public Procurement Rules Lay Bare the Lies of Brexit, because this is one of the key points that we make. Now, of course, still on the subject of Brexit, Brian, we got downvoted somewhat yesterday on YouTube, I suspect because of the comments we made about Nigel Farage. But nonetheless, Nigel Farage calling for 100,000 people out on the streets. Well, just to make sure that the other side gets their people out on the streets as well, Paul Mason commenting in The Guardian today, he wants all kinds of people out. He finished this little article in The Guardian. The headline is "Bond Traders, Trots and Mumsnetters Must Unite Against Farage's Mob." And he ends by saying, "If Nigel Farage leads 100,000 people to intimidate the Supreme Court, I intend to be on the other side of the police crash barrier opposing him. I don't want to be flanked by only my anti-fascist mates from 30 years ago. I want to see an alliance of the left and the radical centre on the streets. That means bond traders from Canary Wharf, arm in arm with placard-carrying trots, masked up Kurdish radicals alongside Mumsnet posters. 80 years on from Cable Street, we don't have many dockers and miners around to help us face down right-wing intimidation. Puny as we are, it's up to us." So there we have it, the two sides being queued up, ready for violence on the streets. Brian?
Well, this is absolutely right, and it's incredibly dangerous because, as we keep saying, and we will keep saying, is that if the government is able to foment, and I'm going to use that word deliberately, foment violence on the streets, then of course they can call in all the powers that go with it. We can have increasingly vicious paramilitary police. We can be establishing curfews. We can be stopping groups of people meeting. Very quickly, they can bring on the dictatorship. So anybody who at the moment is pushing for some form of violent action or aggressive action on the streets is absolutely playing into the hands of the other side. And on the subject of Nigel Farage, if some people are so tied into the love of the party, because we see this with the Conservatives, we see it with the Lib Dems and Labour, people who can't break away from the party and the party leader. I'm afraid with UKIP, if we look at what UK column has consistently predicted over the years, that UKIP would be led into a cul-de-sac. That has absolutely been done by Nigel Farage, and he has steadfastly refused to attack all of the key seats of problem that we have highlighted year after year. This brings us to corruption, treason in Westminster, criminality, child abuse, and we've got international banking fraud. Nigel Farage will not touch any of these subjects because, of course, if he did, he would be starting to hit the real spot. So if people are unhappy with the comments on Nigel Farage, you better brace yourselves because there's more to come. This is the man who would not tackle common purpose, did not want to know. And at one stage, the comment made to me in person was, well, we're not interested in the truth because people are going to think we're wacky. If you've got a party that's not interested in the truth, we're in deep trouble. So I think people need to toughen up and they need to have a really good look at this man and what he has done, including waving hands in front of the camera saying, "We have achieved Brexit." That was the quote. And of course, we've absolutely not achieved Brexit.
David.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to concur. I've met Nigel Farage 3 times consecutively during one day, and on the first time I met him, initially from sort of Roger Helmer, who basically, when I said, we spoke on the phone, we've had an email exchange. I'm Dave Ellis from Strategic Defence. I need to talk to you about EU military union. He ran away from me, and I mean he ran away from me. And then subsequently, I then met Nigel, and he also, at the point of saying we need to discuss quickly about what we've got on our analysis with EU military defence union. He ran away from me, and I mean ran. There was no stopping to say yes, no, whatever. He literally ran away from me. So I believe that these comments that he's made in the European Parliament and during the Brexit campaign, where there was slight comments appertaining to it, now they are calling for an EU army. I think he was fully aware. He was fully aware of what was going on, and this was a very clever way of dealing with it. So the reality of what's actually UKIP supposed to be all about, and the body of the people there. And I've got to say as well, from my own experience, from within the Conservative Party, they are suffering from exactly the same problem. 99.9% of all the people in the Tory Party are locked out from actually doing anything effectual whatsoever because of the way that it is very sophisticatedly run with a very advanced command chain. Anybody that steps outside of whatever the party policy is, they're instantly shut up. If they don't shut up, they're forced out. So this is the problem that we've got with these key issues. It is very much like you said some time ago, Brian, about it's not about who's voting, it's about who's counting the votes. In politics here, it's about who's got control of the policy and who's got control of the party. The body of the party is in essence, and don't want to be disrespectful to anybody that's in a party, but they're actually irrelevant, because they're just propping all this nonsense up. They're not actually, however good they think they are, they're not helping to deal with the problem.
Yeah, this is the key issue. And I will also say, of course, a very large number of UKIP supporters have done extremely good work over the years. But if their power and their effort is corralled by a leadership that will not stand up to be counted on the real issues, then, of course, they are in that cul-de-sac. Well, let's have a look at what our parliamentary system is capable of, and a big thank you to the viewer that highlighted this. Here we have got the Law Commission reforming misconduct in public office, and it's a consultation paper. Now, we've only had a couple of hours to have a look at this. We're going to invite our viewers and listeners to do their own research into it. But my goodness, this is very, very interesting. It says a review of the offence of misconduct in public office was included in our 11th programme of law reform. And what we noticed in this introduction was the fact that very quickly the text, I think, is designed to say, well, this is all very old. The offence is of significant age. The most well-known statement of offence was made in 1783. The offence fell largely into disuse between the late 18th century and the beginning of the 21st century, and many people were unsure of the definition. So all in all, we're a bit unsure about it. But there's been concerns raised, and there's an urgent need for reform. So discussions are taking place with government departments, prosecutors, academic barristers. They don't mention the public at all, although they can comment if they were aware of it. So what are the options that have come out of this? Well, this is the first one. Option 1, a new offence based on breach of duty, addressing only the harms and wrongs. And this is the other theme of this investigation, is that we see it is reducing the power of the law in respect of misconduct. It is not increasing it. So this is bringing it in tighter to the harms and wrongs. And here at the bottom, it said option 1 could lead to a significantly narrower and more focused offence, targeted breaches of duty committed by a smaller, more clearly defined pool of people. So it's getting tighter. It only applies to a few people. This is the power of the law being weakened. Here's option two, a new offence based on the abuse of power. They identified two types of wrong because they say at the moment people are unsure about what this misconduct thing really means. And they go on here to say provisional option one seeks to address only this particular wrong and would significantly narrow the scope of the offence. It would only apply where there was direct harm. So option two is also narrowing it, but it's done in a little more of a subtle way. What's option three? Well, we really get to understand the thing because option three is we're going to get rid of the offence altogether. The final option would be to remove, quote, the common law offence of misconduct in public office altogether from the law of England and Wales and not replace it. So this is a direct attack, Mike, and it's not very subtle. I'll just bring it.
Well, just before you do that, I mean, there's two points here. The first is that misconduct in public office currently carries a tariff of life imprisonment, up to life imprisonment. So this, of course, would then reduce that risk as well, that if you commit an offence, misconduct while you're in public office, you wouldn't end up with that kind of result. But this business of the age of a law, this is a fundamental constitutional principle in the UK. The older the law, the more respect it has because successive generations have considered it to be an appropriate law. So it has endured. And so the older the law, this business of throwing out old laws means that you're throwing out your best laws in most cases.
And common law.
Yes.
And common law. So we went to the end of the document and we found this, Chapter 8, Complementary Legal Reforms. And I'd just like to highlight this bit. It says consideration would need to be given at that point as to how the law could ensure that public office as a concept did not disappear from the criminal law altogether. So when you get into this, not only is it attacking misconduct, it's also suggesting that you wouldn't even be able to frame a charge because the concept of public office might have gently disappeared. So who is the organisation pursuing all this? Well, here they are, the Law Commission. And we'd like to say, as always, statutory, independent. Don't worry, Mike, they're independent. They've independent of government, presumably. They're good people looking at the law. I've got an eye on the clock here, so we go through this pretty quickly. Who are they? Well, they've got a board. Who appoints the board? Well, it's Elizabeth Truss, Lord Chancellor and Secretary of State for Justice. She's got no law training at all, so clearly ideal for the job. The chair of the board is this gentleman, Judge Sir David Bean. He's got a little bit of a checkered history if you check up on him. 4 commissioners. We've got Nick Hopkins, University of Reading. We've got Stephen Lewis, Clifford Chance. And the comment magic circle is not mine. You will find that on the Law Commission text because Clifford Chance is one of the big 5 so-called magic circle law firms. And their combined turnover of the 5, I believe, is £4 billion. David Ormerod, criminal justice expert, Queen Mary University. Nicholas Paynes, QC. And then we've got a chief executive who's this gentleman, Phil Golding. He gets 20 members of the government legal service to help him and 2 members of parliamentary council. And off to the side, there's a non-executive board member, Sir David Bell, the Vice-Chancellor of University of Reading. He's on a basic pay scale for the university alone of £257,000 a year. But I believe he's paid well, it's disgraceful, really. I think that the Law Commission pays him £300 a day if he's involved with them.
We should probably point out that's not the same Sir David Bell of Common Purpose fame.
It isn't, and this is something people need to be careful of researching because people do have the same names. But there's the little nest, but they're all independent of government.
Yeah,
remarkable. So here's the chief executive, and what did he say when he took up his job? He said, I'm very much looking forward to working with commissioners, staff and stakeholders to help deliver a new programme of law reform as effectively and efficiently as possible. So here we see the destruction of our common law carried out by a group of people appointed by politicians who are using a change agenda And let's remind ourselves, these are the same politicians who now say they can create a kill list in order to kill anybody they want. Terrorists or bad people, very bad people, can now be put on a kill list. This is extraordinarily dangerous stuff, Mike. It's going on in front of our eyes, and we need to talk about it, and we need people in political parties to talk about it, because this is the danger. Britain collapsed from the inside. This is not the same as an external European threat.
Now, of course, government gets upset when other bodies veto what they're doing, which is why they're having an attack on the House of Lords at the moment. But Matthew Rycroft, our illustrious ambassador to the United Nations, well, he was talking yesterday about reforming the UN Security Council. He's pretty upset that basically Russia and China veto so much of what Britain wants. So they want to increase the size of the Security Council. Not too much though, because we don't want to cause problems where if we increase the size of the thing by too much, then it might cause delays because of wrangling amongst members. So we've got to increase membership just a little, but you know, at the core of this is the fact that we've got to stop this veto. When we consider Security Council reform, we said we must, of course, be mindful of the need to ensure its effectiveness and make sure that that is never compromised. So they want to invite people from Brazil, perhaps Germany, India, Japan, maybe some kind of African representation, so long as they can sort of dilute the effect of Russia and China without causing too much problem for the British agenda.
Yeah, but if the organisation's not doing what you want, then you need to get in and reform it. Absolutely. And make sure it does what you want it to do. Well, that's the reason we need to counter this whole rotten business. So, British Constitution Group, 19th of November. There are still tickets available, but I have to say we've been absolutely stunned by the response from people from a very wide body of the public saying, my goodness, thank you for this. We need something like this to talk about what to do next, as we see Brexit stalled, of course, and people are now getting lost amongst the political parties. So if you want more information, you want to get tickets, British Constitution Group website, just revamped and looking extremely smart. Now, a very, very big thank you to all of those who have donated to the Dohertys. We are absolutely stunned that £1,500, £1,600 has been raised in the last 24 hours. And I'm going to say this is really wonderful because it tells us that people do understand the seriousness of this case and the plight of the parents. And this sum of money is an excellent start, but effectively Brian and Janice Doherty are now totally dependent on public generosity to survive. Aside from accommodation, there are certain travel needs and other events which are going to require money. So if you haven't donated and were thinking about it, it's still required. They are going to need a lot of support from us, the public, to survive, but also to get the real facts of this case out. And this is the sort of donation that we've received. I'll pop this up on screen because we've got something really lovely that was sent to us today. It says, Brian and Mike and all, thank you for all you do. Herewith something towards your efforts, in particular for the recent help for the Dohertys, and a donation was enclosed. So we're going to say thank you very much for your thank yous, and thank you for just a wonderful response to that plea for money to help the Dohertys.
Okay, Dr. David Halpern has been reappointed as the What Works National Advisor. Now, this is a 3-year appointment. It takes effect from this month. Well, in fact, it took effect from the end of October 2016. He was the What Works National Advisor since 2013. And of course, he is also Chief Executive of the Behavioural Insights team. He was a founding director of the Institute for Government. And between 2001 and 2007, he was chief analyst at the Prime Minister's Strategy Unit. Well, there you go. Now, why is he interesting? Well, aside from the fact that he is running the Behavioural Insights team, of course, he produced this document, Mindspace, which is all about changing people's behaviour. We've covered it many times on the programme. And just this quote is just spectacular from this document. Mindspace effects depend at least partly on automatic influences on behaviour. That means that citizens may not fully realise that their behaviour is being changed, or at least how it is being changed. So they can change our behaviour. We don't know how it's being changed. We don't know how it's being changed, but it's changing.
And Mike, at the time that we originally reported on this, we were looking at our own politicians as being people who were out of control. We're now seeing politicians who were prepared to create a kill list out of nowhere. And these same politicians are unleashing applied behavioural psychology on the nation to change our behaviour. This is deeply sinister. We've got the same politicians who are involved in the abuse of children, killing people overseas with no proper judicial process, and they are boasting of their ability to use this technology to change the way people think and behave. How dangerous does it have to get in this country? And of course, they've also sold this technology to America and Australia, and they've boasted about the success of that sale.
Okay, so let's have a look at what works is. This is all about evidence for decision makers, driving better spending decisions by putting clear evidence in the hands of public service professionals and commissioners. Who's involved in this? Well, a number of groups. NICE, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. What works? The College of Policing. The Centre for Aging Better. Does that make you feel comfortable? Do you want to age better, Brian?
As we see the bodies coming out of the NHS and the so-called care system for elderly people, I don't get a good feeling about this at all.
Okay, and the What Works Centre for Wellbeing?
Well, I think that we know where that's going to go.
Right, so well, who's behind this? Well, of course, it was Oliver Letwin, and he said in March 2013, we launched the What Works Network, a world-leading initiative designed to embed robust evidence at the heart of local and national policy making. Now, what's important about this, of course, is that this isn't about providing evidence to help make policy decisions. This is about providing the evidence which allows them to most effectively implement the predetermined policy decisions, and that's the key point here. And the other key point is that as you read down through this, they are discussing the internationalisation of this agenda. The UK's What Works centres have already begun to attract attention from across the world. Most countries are asking similar questions, and they want to be able to. So, you know, this is not just a UK initiative; it's a global initiative eventually, and it is part of the British soft power that they've been that Priti Patel and Boris Johnson have been saying so much about in recent weeks.
Yeah. David, you were commenting about the fact that certain policy information is disappearing from the Conservative Party website. It seems to me that as more information is coming out in the public domain about what the real policy is, this very subversive, destructive change agenda, the Tories are now trying to hide the tracks.
Yeah, if we just start from a point of sort of brass tacks with this, in politics, and particularly any party that's got control in government, policy is the thing. It's the thing that everybody gets instructions as to what to do, and the people that control the policy are king or queen. So the Prime Minister and the Cabinet are in essence pretty much just implementers. They do as they're told. They are under instruction from the higher command. So the most important office is the guy that's in charge of policy. And that formerly was Oliver Letwin. Now, since Brexit and since Mrs May has come in and had what appears to be a reshuffle, there's been some big changes there in the information appertaining to policy within the Conservative Party. So if it's possible, can we have an appeal for information from everybody, all the viewers out there, to help us with this? Who now is responsible and where is this being conducted from, and what the framework is now, because it doesn't appear to now be apparent. So if anybody can help with that, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, excellent. Well, whilst we've got a UK government, of course, warmongering overseas on a daily basis, let's take a focus on the engine of politics, which is child abuse. And an astonishing article here from the Mail, which is all about Met Police Chief Hogan Howe, who's apologised to ex-Tory MP Mr Proctor for significant failings in a bungled VIP child abuse inquiry. This is just sickening stuff. And the reality is that there's been no investigation. This is one line from the Mail. Detectives did not find a shred of evidence to support Nick's extraordinary claims against Mr Proctor, ex-Army Chief Lord Bramall, Lord Britton, ex-MP Ted Heath, and the late Labour peer Lord Granville Jenner. Well, the answer to that is because the police are not investigating any of these crimes. And we've labelled at the top, no investigation equals no child abuse, nothing to see. We can tell our viewers and listeners today there is no child abuse inquiry. Nothing is happening. So we are quietly being told nothing to see, go away. And if we want further proof, we wrote an open letter to the policing minister, Mr Lewis, about the Metropolitan Police whistleblower. And what has happened? No reply has been received from this man. Meanwhile, the Met Police whistleblower has been bullied, harassed and accused of being mentally ill by the Met Police. The Independent Police Complaints Commission have stalled and obfuscated. No MP will assist this man, and no investigation has been made into the evidence that he brought forward to the cover-up of child abuse, including child deaths. And that cover-up was perpetrated by MPs, the Metropolitan Police, other police services, local authorities, children's services, and child protection charities, the very charities who are now clustered around the supposed child abuse inquiry. So we see that the British state will not investigate child abuse because, of course, if it were to do so, it would reveal that we have a government which is not only abusing children, it's prepared to cover up that abuse because of the other areas of the establishment involved. This is sickening stuff.
Okay, we'll end on a bit of financial news. Royal Bank of Scotland is to set up a fund for compensating small businesses. This is arising out of the GRG, the Global Restructuring Group. This is where Royal Bank of Scotland were effectively asset stripping small and medium-sized companies and calling in loans when it wasn't necessary to do so, and then stealing their assets and selling them off. Now, they have put aside £400 million, apparently to repay fees to business customers allegedly mistreated by RBS. So whether that extends to assets that were sold, I don't know. But anyway, the key point is here, this has been dragging on for years and years and years. The Tomlinson report several years ago, which Colin Canning was involved in, he will be speaking at the British Constitution Group conference. So if you want to know a bit more about the background to this story, come along to that. The Tomlinson report, I think, was 2012. Then the Financial Conduct Authority said that it was going to investigate. There was going to be a report published. It still hasn't been published. It's expected to be published maybe by the end of the year. It's kind of Chilcot-like, and so it goes on.
But of course, we see the perversion of language there, Mike. They've been mistreated. These poor people have somehow been mistreated by the banks. No, we're talking fraud and corruption by the banks. And until we start using this proper language to describe what's happening around us, we're not going to make the progression we need. So language and the abuse of language by the state is one of the topics that will be discussed at the British Constitution event.
Well, here's a perfect example of abusive language because I'm highlighting this Reuters article here for exactly that reason. Bank of England sets out new rules to end bank bailouts. Brian, tell me what you think that means.
Well, I think that it's going to put Bank of England in control, is what it tells me.
It implies the Bank of England is creating some new rules, which will mean what?
That they can control what happens to other banks.
But no more bailouts for banks?
Yes.
Right. No. No, that's not what it means, because apparently what it means is that they are in fact relaxing the rules on banks to give them more time to get in a position where bank bailouts would not be required. And they're relaxing on the rules on banks so that fewer banks are affected by these rules. So how you get from that headline to the reality, I don't know. But anyway, what Reuters goes on to say is that the Bank of England said on Tuesday that Britain's lenders would be given an extra 2 years until 2022 to build up sufficient funds to ensure they do not need to rely on taxpayer bailouts if they go under. And they are also making sure that the threshold for these rules will rise from 40,000 accounts to 80,000 accounts. So if your bank is small enough that it only has 40,000 accounts, then these rules don't apply to you. And in fact, it's going to be that the bank is small enough that you have 80,000 accounts, the rules will not apply to you. What did Mark Carnage have to say? He said this policy is a significant milestone on the journey to end too big to fail in the UK. So we're making that journey longer, but this is a significant milestone to getting to it.
Yeah. Fine words from a Canadian who's supposed to be running our national bank, which isn't. The bank in England, as I think David Ellis suggested we described it, not the Bank of England, but the bank in England. Yes. Is that right, David?
Yeah, it's about the size of it. Let's start using the right language. You know, words count. That's what Peter Zwack kept telling me. It's a bit like referring to Conservative Party representatives who sit in Parliament. You know, let's stop referring to them as just sort of broadcast or Labour MPs or Liberal MPs or Tory MPs. Let's refer to them as what they are. They're first and foremost party representatives. The rest of it is all, you know, very much secondary or thirdary. If we're going to finish, can I just mention Theresa May out in India? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Some of this other stuff, just closing back to the sort of initial thing we were talking about, EU military and the F-35 and industry and steel particularly. There's a lot of this that's not stacking up out there at the moment with Theresa May's not the trade deal, because she can't talk about trade deals at the moment until we're actually out of the EU. So there's something very fundamentally upside down about this. But one thing is certain, is about how India is blasting ahead with its prime industrial driver to get hold of a strategic ballistic submarine. Now, it's doing that in conjunction with Russia. So they're actually building a bomber with Russia. And they're also building strategic nuclear weapons with Russia. They're also building an aircraft carrier with Russia. And one can only assume that they are also building nuclear weapons with Russia, because all that fits in with the recipe. Now, I'm jumping to a conclusion there, obviously, but that's my opinion. So all this sort of nonsense about, you know, what we're sort of seeing out there with the steel, we're seeing their industry blasting ahead with these prime drivers, and they're going to end up with they're going to go ahead in leaps and bounds here. There are two facets to this. One, obviously, with the steel being withdrawn from Britain, from Tata, back to India, that what are we going to see withdraw with it as well? Are we going to see the rest of our engineering come with it as well, i.e. Jaguar Land Rover? Are they going to withdraw out of the Midlands back to India? You know, that's the questions we need to be asking now. And secondly, how on earth this overlaps with the way that India conducts its monetary policy, you know, with not allowing currency to leave the country like we do. There's a very different arrangements over there. But fundamentally, we've got this huge problem because we can't sell India strategic ballistic missile nuclear technology because we're contracted under, you know, very sophisticated special contract arrangements that Macmillan established with the nukes with the Americans. So that's a business that we've been locked out of. Much the same as EFA. We're not selling EFA around the world, or, you know, the European fighter. No clue in the title there. No good calling it a Typhoon. It's EFA. You know, we're struggling to sell that because of the contractual obligations between the rest of the Pan-Avia partners across Europe. So, you know, this is just, you know, it's just one continual disaster after another, you know, and I've got to come to a sort of final stop, and that is the threat is us being poor. And this is fundamentally what we're dealing with here, is that, for our families and our stability of our country, the danger and the immediate threat to us is not just from our own government, in effect, but being poor.
David, a moment ago you mentioned how important it is to be in control of the policy, and I'm afraid I have to say that I believe that is the policy. That is the policy.
To make us poor, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, David.
Bit of a depressing note to leave it on, but
we've got to be realistic. We can't. We are fighting. If we call it a political battle, we're fighting a political battle at the moment. We've got to be realistic. We've got to call things. We've got to call a spade a spade. Otherwise, we don't get anywhere. So if it's a bit gloomy and tough, we've got to deal with this. Well, David, thank you very much for joining us. That brings us to the end of today's news. Thank all of you for that tremendous support for the Dohertys. I'm going to say, please don't stop, because actually there is a great deal to be done for the family. We will be able to talk about this more in the coming days and weeks, but at the moment something very critical is going on. We will tell you more about that as soon as we can, but they need your financial support in order to give them ongoing safety and security. All right, that's it from us today. We will be back at the same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.